Welcome to the EMEA Recruitment Podcast in partnership with international medical charity Operation Smile. To find out how you can support this cause, please visit emearecruitment.com/operation-smile. In this episode, we welcome Alex Hunt, the Divisional Finance Director at IMI Hydronic Engineering in Switzerland. He explores the mindset that has led to career success, as well as providing insight into building specialist teams.
So, hello everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the EMEA Recruitment Podcast in partnership with our good friends over at Operation Smile. So, as my colleague Rose mentioned, we're delighted to welcome Alex onto the podcast today. So, hopefully you can hear me okay, Alex?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, Paul. Thanks very much.
Perfect. So, whereabouts in the world do we find you today?
So I am in Switzerland, in Azan, so just outside of Nyon, which finds itself in between Geneva and Lausanne. In the office, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the obvious questions to ask people at the start of any podcast these days is how things are going in relation to getting back to normality from the COVID situation. And when we're recording this at the end of October 21. So how is life at the moment, after all the challenges of COVID for you?
Yeah, so from a business perspective, I mean, we've, we kept our offices open here in Azan at our divisional head office the entire time. Now, we had limitations and restrictions in place, of course, and we still have that in place today. And we keep the max number of people that we want in the office to a certain level. And, what it's introduced is just a level of flexibility for people to, work from the office, work from home. And what we've seen is from a productivity level, it, actually remained very high, certainly, if not higher than pre-pandemic levels. So, I think it's worked for us. And I recognize that each business is going to have, a different approach. But for us, introducing this level of flexibility has worked, and it worked quite well.
That's good. It's good to hear. I mean, I think that, it's been a bit of a work in progress for most companies to try and get to that stage where everybody's reasonably happy with what they're being offered, and the flexibility is a huge part of that. I mean, how have you found it personally? Because as you mentioned earlier, it's different for every individual, their home and work life. So personally, I mean, how have you found it yourself?
Yeah, so we took an approach within our group for IMI that, the last thing we wanted is both the division managing director and the division finance director to fall ill at the same time. So we always wanted to ensure some way, somehow that one of us was going to be, let's say, fit throughout. So we took an approach of my boss and I just decided, he's in the office or I'm in the office, and during the height of, I'd say, the pandemic, that's how we operated. So what that resulted in is I work from home quite frequently, if not the majority of the time, where my boss was in the office. And those infrequent times when we were both in, again, we just used common sense and applied the precautions that we put in place in order to maintain safety. Now, as we've come out of some of the height of the pandemic, what we've done is found ourselves in the office a bit more, but it's a matter of, again, with the vaccinations that are in place and our precautions that are still in place, it works for us. And so, I found myself in the office more frequently. But at the same time, I'm comfortable either working at home or in the office. It really has had minimal impact on me. I
mean, I was going to ask this question a bit later on in the discussion, but actually it seems quite relevant to ask it now, really, given your answer to that. I mean, because obviously with your position, as you mentioned, being in the director level role, you're managing people, building up a culture in the business there. And I suppose one of the biggest challenge the majority of managers have is keeping the culture of their teams alive when there's so much remote working going on, and keeping the energy level and the goals fixed and focused on. So how have you managed to still do that? I mean, I guess is it still a work in progress? Keeping the culture and the energy high in the team that you have.
Yeah, so I'd say one of the things that we found was an impact immediately was getting used to working on Teams or Zoom or whatever collaboration platform you have, and to try to bridge the gap that we saw of not having that impromptu chat with somebody that you saw in the hallway or around a coffee. We started to plan in a coffee chat, a virtual coffee chat, and just to have the opportunity to have a non-work related conversation and to check in with people, how they're doing, how they're coping. So we had that going quite frequently for the first, I'd say, probably 9 months. And that was I did it for my team. We did it as part of the division and also our head office team here, just to continue to have that, to foster the connection and personal connection, knowing that most everybody working virtually, it was difficult to maintain that. So, and it was also an opportunity just to be able to check in with people at a personal level to say, how are you doing? How are you coping? What support do you need? And is there anything that we could do to help for those that might be struggling? So I think that was a means of also getting people comfortable working in this virtual world, which was something brand new for all of us. And as time has gone on, what we've seen is maybe a little bit the opposite happening, and that is there's quite a bit of the virtual fatigue when you find yourself actually sitting in front of the screen for long periods of time trying to figure out, all right, how do I get to having that personal time or personal space? Because I think people also find, and I find it quite easy, just find that somebody's available on Teams and ping them right away, and you're not maybe not so conscious of, well, am I interrupting something? So I think we continue to learn every day how to operate in this virtual world, and also how to deal with still keep it personal, while at the same time making sure that you're also staying connected to your team.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's an ongoing challenge. I think that's constantly moving, especially as I say, recording this at the end of October. I think there's an expectation that there's going to be a few challenges as we get closer to the Christmas time and the virus increasing. So, but I guess this time around it won't be quite as much of a cultural shock if we've got to go back to working from home a little bit more. But I mean, did you find that actually you maybe know some of the team a little bit better than what you did before the COVID situation? Because obviously, with video calls, I think before the COVID situation came around, if if a child ran in the background, it was often frowned upon, before we were all in the situation. But I think what everyone's come a lot more lenient on is the fact that, strange things are going to happen in these video calls. And because we're all in the same situation and everyone accepts it now. So did you find in some ways, your team maybe a little bit better than what you did before?
Yeah, I think some yes, some probably not. And I think, it all comes down to, what is happening in each person's life and in their situation working remotely. So, I think the thing that still is a struggle for many, for me personally, is, again, that missing that personal connection of just the running into somebody in the hallway and having a conversation that may be completely unrelated to work. So from that perspective, I think it's still a bit of a challenge. But again, I've had my team, for 5 years, known them quite well. And so learning something new has been interesting of what happens at home. Yeah. So I think that is kind of a bit of a learning piece out of it, and also is, at some point in time, rather comical, given certain situations. So, but I think, as you touched on, what it's forced or what's driven is, patience, flexibility, and to increase an understanding of things are going on in life, and, to have, I think, an appreciation for balancing what's happening, when someone's working at home. There are going to be disruptions, and that's okay.
No, it's true. I mean, I think those three things you mentioned there, the patience, the flexibility, and the trying to get the balance of things are all key areas that I think people have had to focus on and been challenged with really over this period of time. And I think obviously you also mentioned there about the conversations that you miss out on. We're walking down the corridor having conversations that are non-work related. And I thought, given that comment, I'd ask you a non-work related question actually, because obviously we have this show in partnership with Operation Smile. I thought that I'd ask you, what was the last thing that made you smile, Alex?
Well, many things make me smile, just my sense of humor, but I'd say the other day, just having a conversation, it was a team conversation on a project we're running, and an individual part of the team, just in the midst of a serious bit of feedback, and the request came in from the side, Dad, when are we having lunch? So just couldn't help to crack a smile and actually laugh. And again, that just shows, there are demands for people, working remotely, while and having to take care of family at the same time. And it's just kind of comical to hear that whisper coming in from the side.
Yeah, kids, they'll always spring these things on you at the time when you expect it the least, I guess. But as you say, it is something that it aligns so many people, the challenges that people have at home, and trying to get that balance there and so on. And it's, as I say, as you say there, if these things make you smile, and that also helps to get through the day and get through the difficult times as well. And I thought, obviously you've got a very broad and varied career, in some great businesses across a range of different countries. And I thought it'd be good to ask you really the question about really, I suppose, what it feels like to be the divisional FD now. Do you feel like you've made it now in your career? Well,
I think, made it, I think is, that's a very, it's a personal take on individuals' careers. And look, I'm very satisfied with what I've done, what I've achieved, and, also the teams that I've worked with and seen, the development from key people in teams, not only here at IMI, but also previously at Smith & Nephew and even my time when I was at Bosch early on. So, I'm satisfied, I would say, with what I've done, where I am, and certainly, real passionate about what I do and my contributions here at IMI and, the team I work with. So, I would say I am happy with that and made it. I think it's a continuing journey. So I wouldn't say that I'm done. That would be my take on it.
Hi everybody, it's Paul Thomas here. I hope that you're well and you're enjoying the podcast so far. Thank you once again for your continued support listening to the podcast. I just wanted to break into the recording to talk to you about a really exciting new partnership that EMEA Recruitment has along with Operation Smile. And as founder of EMEA Recruitment, it's an honour and a privilege to announce this partnership. Personally, I was born with a cleft lip and palate, so the mission of Operation Smile is something that I have a strong personal connection with. It's not an understatement to say that the dentists and surgeons that helped me were life changers. It's not only about the actual operations that take place, the support and care post and pre-operation are beyond value, and from personal experience I can only say that I'd not be the confident, happy person I am today without this support. I want to help children experience the support and care and skill that I experienced on my journey, and hope that we can do this along with Operation Smile. Every 3 minutes, a child is born with a cleft lip or cleft palate, and the mission of Operation Smile is to provide help and support to these children through providing 6,000 medical volunteers across 80 countries who are dedicated to help these children with facial conditions, most commonly cleft lip and cleft palate. More than 200,000 children are born with a cleft every year, and they are often unable to speak, eat, socialise or even smile. However, it can take as little as 45 minutes and cost just €180 or 182 francs for Operation Smile to provide a child with life-changing surgery.
Now, in partnership with Operation Smile, EMEA Recruitment is raising valuable funds and aiming to create 100 new smiles to support the organisation to provide free surgeries for children and young adults all over the world. Please help us by donating through the link in the bio, or get in touch to see how your company can help get involved too. For the moment, I'll leave you to carry on listening to the rest of the podcast, but if there's anything I can do in terms of answering any questions or finding out how you can help and support EMEA Recruitment and Operation Smile, then please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
No, I mean, you mentioned in that your time that you spent at Robert Bosch and Smith and Nephew. I know you've had a good period of time at Philips as well. And I think, you know, when you look at your background, one of the things that does stand out, which is rarer and rarer these days, is the fact that you've been loyal to companies you work for. You've always had a good period of time within every company that you've been at. And I think going back to the other thing you mentioned earlier, you know, patience over this period of time, you know, is something that's, I think, is a good quality to have, but something that a lot of people, you know, struggle with, especially also when it comes down to their career path as well. So I thought I'd ask you what you feel that the benefits have been really in relation to being loyal and maybe patience with the companies you've been at, rather than moving company every 2 years, which now in this modern day and age seems to be more common and more the thing to do really with the younger generation especially.
Yeah, it's a good question, Paula. Look, I had the fortune of working with some really good people, mentors and bosses early on in my career that were quite, you know, progressive in their thoughts around development. And, you know, what that instilled in me is, you know, it's all upon me. If I want something, then I've got to make sure that I'm looking at, well, how do I get that? And, you know, I was able to leverage my bosses and mentors' strength of creating an environment in which I could succeed, and for me to grab that, and through, you know, demonstrated performance, deliver, and then have opportunities open up for me. And for me, you know, it worked for me from the standpoint of being also very flexible from a geographic standpoint. I had no issues picking up and moving for, you know, another opportunity within, you know, whether it was in Bosch or whether in Philips. You know, it was just part of, you know, kind of my DNA because of my background and upbringing. You know, I moved a lot, and for me it was second nature. For if an opportunity presents itself, then for me to consider, does it fit with not only the next job or role that I'd like to achieve, but is it getting me on that path to the role after that? But again, I knew also that it all came down to performance, and that performance would open up the doors, get recognition, and afford you the opportunity as well to make those key connections. And so, you know, if you look through my career, while I may have stayed at companies for, you know, longer periods of time, you would see that there were, you know, the rotations of different roles in those companies were rather short. So that, I think, still aligns with what you see in some people in the way they manage their careers. But I would say, you know, it worked for me. And, you know, I know that that's not everybody's approach of the global mobility. But again, as I say, it has worked for me.
It's really interesting because, I mean, within that, you mentioned that opportunities that opened up through the performance that you brought to the table, and you took those opportunities. I mean, a lot of that is, that I guess, a bit down to mindsets. You know, I mean, we speak a lot to more junior individuals who are hoping to climb the career ladder and try to get them to understand that, you know, it's about taking the opportunities when they come around. I mean, where do you think that this mindset comes from your point of view? I mean, is it something your parents had that has stayed within your blood, you know, taking opportunities and being quite risk averse, or is it something your mentors have advised you to do?
Probably a bit of both, of just personal background, upbringing, and you know, advice from mentors. And, you know, as I mentioned, you my upbringing, my father was ex-US military, German mother. We moved a lot. And then as well, when he left the military and joined the corporate world, he had the opportunity to again go on an expat assignment back to Europe. So for me, it was second nature that we were moving quite frequently. And so, for what I saw there is that affords you opportunities. You have plenty of challenges, especially in your youth. But it enabled or instilled in me that mindset of, change is all right. And, it will always be there. So, and with change, there comes opportunity, and that's what's worked for me. And, I've also had mentors that have, talked about, and this opportunity may be interesting, but what does it lead to in the next step? And is that next step aligned with what your career ambitions are? And that's something that I've tried to share as well with my teams about, opportunities that present themselves. And, if they look at what they want to do, to not look at that very next role, but look at the one after. And do the moves facilitate you getting to what your career goals are and what your development is? So, that's I've benefited from people and their insight around that. And also just, as I said, the personal upbringing and the mindset that came along with that.
I mean, aligned to this, if we have people listening to the podcast who are earlier on in their finance career journey and they look at your profile and so you've obviously got 25 years, more than 25 years experience in this area and now at the FD level, what qualities do you feel a director of finance needs to possess in order to be really efficient and effective at their job? Because then I guess if that is we get your thoughts on that, then that helps a lot in terms of helping any of the listeners to determine the kind of areas they need to look at in their own careers, really.
Yeah, sure. If you look at the role, you're looking at a lot of the core accounting that comes with being responsible for controls, whether statutory or management accounts, and you're also looking at just the view of from a business as a business partner. How do you again look at performance management and how can you help to shape the strategy, provide insight, and move the business along? And at the same time, we also then have specialty functions in this particular division, being here in Switzerland, running a Swiss principal structure of, very, very intricate tax elements. So, in all of that, there's no way that I would ever say that I can be an expert in all of those fields. But what's most important is I've managed my career is those areas where it's not my specialty nor my background. Make sure that you hire somebody that is a specialist in that, and always hire the best talent that you can in those areas where you recognize those aren't your strengths. So that's something that I've done throughout my career is to ensure hire the best, hire for talent, because that talent will get up to speed, even if they don't have the experience right away. The talent side and their drive will make up for that as they develop in the role. So, I think those are some of the things of acknowledging you cannot be an expert in all the elements of a finance director's role, and you need to surround yourself with the best team and then work through that team. And that for me has worked so far.
No, it's interesting, and I think obviously linked to that, there has to be, I suppose, from your side and anyone else's side who's been in a certain discipline for 10, 15, 20 years, there has to be a bit of a love of the discipline to help you through the tougher periods, because everyone has these tougher times in their careers or even their days and weeks, really. So a question I like to ask people is it is often, well, why you chose finance in the first place, or maybe a better question is why finance chose you, because obviously it's not often a situation where people choose their discipline. It usually comes around through a chance meeting or a chance circumstance that changes the rest of their life, so I thought I'd ask you, why it started in finance in the first place, really.
Yeah, for me, as I looked at, options coming out of university and for functionally which direction I would like to go, for me, it was, out of finance, what I view is you get to see the entire business. And, if you desire, if you want to really understand how the business operates and what's behind the numbers, well, then you have the opportunity to get out and see the entire business and the what influences the numbers. So I think, that was something as well for me that, I could report numbers all day long, but to really understand what's happening, it was a matter of getting out, interacting with, whether somebody on the shop floor of a manufacturing plant or, talking to a sales individual around what's happening in the markets, that brings life to the numbers. And so for me, I thought, from finance, I can see the entire spectrum of how a business operates. So that was what was most interesting for me and why I chose this path.
Interesting. And as you say, bringing life to the numbers and bringing the business partnering side of the job is now is nearly in every finance role these days. But that is certainly, when I started out in finance recruitment around 20 years ago, it wasn't the case. The finance discipline has changed dramatically over the last 20, 25 years, but there's also a lot of change still on the horizon with the BI and data impact on the finance function and how that's going to change everybody's roles really and lives in general. So I thought I'd ask you what you feel the impact of BI and data is going to be on the finance function of the future and your role really potentially.
Yeah, so I think and it's something that we've been monitoring, we've been looking at, we've been sorting out what our approach is going to be here at Hydronic Engineering. And so, we are launching a program to address that. And because we see it as, it is something that will help speed up how this business makes decisions. Getting the right, getting data available and presented in a way that gives real insight into what's happening and allows people to have that at their fingertips that aren't necessarily the finance community, I think can only help but speed up decision making and speed up the pace of the business. And with that, what we're considering is, again, a dedicated function. We're already launched what we're going to do in that space that is going to revise everything that we've done around the use of data warehouses, how we present data to people. And in that, it really starts with, well, what are the requirements from our key stakeholders? So while before, the approach has been, we're going to collect, the management data, put it into a system and present it in a way that, people can digest. However, it never started with looking at, well, what are the requirements and what are our stakeholders asking for? What are their real needs? So, we're taking the mindset now of looking at, what is it that you need to make the decisions, whether it's on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, but what is it that you need? And let us then go find how we're going to present that to you and enable you to have that when you need it. Because I think the day of, when someone needs to ask a finance individual for a report, for me, we're well beyond that as a business model that just doesn't work anymore. So we need to invest and enable, business leaders to have what they need to make decisions and run the business.
No, I guess linking this to something you mentioned earlier about having great talents and great people around you. I mean, do you think that this has an impact on the future of the discipline in terms of the skills needed to be great in finance? Because I mean, obviously, as you mentioned there, the days of being able to the days of needing to ask a finance person for a spreadsheet seem to be numbered. So it's so much more about the commercial awareness, the listening skills, the influencing skills, and I think whereas at the moment, I think, as I say, most roles now have elements of business partnering to them, but it does seem that this is getting more and more and more the case. So do you think it's going to have quite a big impact on the personality traits that are needed when you're looking at hiring great people?
No, it is, and I think you will need to look at individuals that I still think have a process orientation that will be able to leverage digital in a way that they can see how business processes operate and how you can actually then digitize that in a way that will bring insight into their stakeholders. While that, I think, is something that we'll see more and more in the finance function, cannot forget, though, that all is only enabled if you have a very strong foundation in controls and the accounting side of the function. That needs to be in good shape, solid, and because we know that any issue on the balance sheet will get us into deep trouble as finance leaders. So ensuring that foundation is very strong enables you to start to shift the balance of where the business partners can now operate and the investments that are required to enable them to give greater insight into the business and decisions.
No, this is true, and I think as part of this, bringing the people and the roles together. I mean, I think obviously over the years, there's always been a challenge on recruiting great talents into any business, really. But a question I get asked by a lot of people, and it's quite a challenging one to answer related to this, is what I feel is the true cost of the wrong hire, because it's a difficult thing to get right. When it goes right, everything is great, but when it goes wrong, there's a lot of things that can that are linked to that. So I thought I'd ask you the question that I get asked a lot, and see if you can shed any insight into it as well. So really, what do you think is the true cost of the wrong hire?
Well, first of all, I think right now, especially in this environment, the war on talent is as high as I've ever seen it. So, first of all, finding, good talent is tough. So I think the investment you're making to bring in the right people is, I think, right now at an extremely high cost, because you're seeing the demand for that talent is at a very, very high level. But getting it wrong, one, there's a huge reputational damage that you have to bear. And it is internally, whenever you bring someone in, you're trying to create the environment in which they can be very successful. But if you get that wrong, it is there is that internal view of, well, what was that all about? And, the cost to repair the damage that potentially comes with that in terms of relationship and the trust is, I think, to put a number on that is very difficult, but it certainly is, I think for me, a very big cost. And then you've got the tangible elements of the quantitative elements of, the cost of having gone through the recruitment, the search activities, the engagement that, with your organization, Paul, and others, of just that effort and the organizational time you have to put into that. It is very damaging if you get it wrong. And to recover from that, especially if you've damaged trust internally, it takes quite a bit of time to again, re-earn that trust.
No, and it's interesting because I know you mentioned trying to create environment for people to succeed. And I know it's something you mentioned earlier on in the conversation, that was something that helped you be successful, because your managers and mentors have created the environment for your skills to stand out and succeed in your career. But I guess, it's easier to say than to do. It's quite a challenging thing to put into place, especially in this day and age where there's so much remote working going on. So do you think being your true self, being really authentic is key to that, and there's a building up that culture, building up that environment around your own strengths, weaknesses, and likes and dislikes? Has that been a key to the building that environment?
Yeah, I think, you've got to be authentic, because otherwise, people are smart. They'll figure you out very quickly, and recognize, are you authentic, or is it just a false picture that you're portraying? And I think what I've tried to do is really be open, honest, and frank with people, and I think that's the best. For me, I think it's the only way to operate. And with that is providing that active coaching and mentoring to others in the organization, I think can help to also build your own personal brand, and just reinforce what kind of individual you are. So without a question, being authentic and I guess a bit of a tired saying of just walking the talk. If you're not doing that, people will figure it out, and you lose you lose trust in the organization, and people will, they'll not look to work with you. So I think it is, for my organization, my team, I work on just being very open and frank with them, talk about what are the key things that need to be, we need to work on. Be very clear as we look at setting out the goals and objectives for the year, what we need to do, how are we going to do that, what are the resources that we need, and whether we can afford to do that or not, and have just an open conversation with people, because I think that again has worked well for me on the receiving end of talking with my bosses from the past, and I think that's worked well in my interactions with my team.
No, I think you mentioned there the previous mentors and managers you've had, and you've also mentioned earlier about the learning and developing and keeping your own career moving forwards. So I thought, just to end on, whether there was either there was any particular mentor or manager you that has really stood out to you that you think is worth mentioning, or whether there's a particular book that you're reading at the moment that's really helping on the learning and development side. For either answer could be interesting for the network to hear. What they could do, really.
Yeah, I mean, I won't name them by name, but yes, somebody from early on. So I moved in my first people manager role, and then continued to actually, I succeeded this individual 2 different times, and I've stayed close with them over the years. What I found is they were able to keep me grounded, always through just sense of humor, and in a way of looking at areas for development, having a conversation around that. So that personal connection is something that helped a lot in shaping me on how I worked with individuals in my team as well. And I think the humor was a way of also ensuring that you stay humble as you go through managing your own career, and not trying to get ahead of yourself. So that's worked worked for me on the receiving side, and looking at and understanding everybody's different. And adapting your style to those that are in your team, but understanding, I think humor is something that all of us can appreciate, used in the right way, and I think that's been important, an important reminder for me, and something that I reflect on from input from a mentor that I've had in the past. In terms of book I'm reading, I just started, and it's more about businesses and what are things that could happen in the future that would impact us. and what are the things that we need to be aware of. So there's a book that actually we just had a workshop here in the past week with a futurist called Matthew Griffin, and he's got a book out called Exponential Technology Codex, and it just talks about the technologies and business models that in the future that could impact particular business segments, and we're looking at what is it that could impact our business in the future, be that 10, 30 years out, and what do we need to start doing today to be able to position ourselves to still be around and be a leading player in the markets where we operate in that time period, knowing that things will change. So it's it's a bit challenging. It pushes you into a very an uncomfortable space. But the key thing is it's forcing you to think about what are the possibilities and challenges that we could be facing, that things that we need to do to improve the business today and prepare ourselves.
No, I think that ties up things quite nicely, because I think you mentioned there the business is looking forward about things that are on the horizon and the changes that are there to make changes to meet the challenges, and that's very linked into the one of the first comments you made at the start of the podcast. But I suppose in terms of your own career and how you've looked at it, you've been excited by challenges, excited by changes, and have embraced these as they've come along. And so you can see actually the fit with yourself and the current business is obviously good, as well, because that's well aligned, so there's a good partnership there that's clear as well. So I think that feels like a good way to conclude the podcast, Alex, actually. And obviously I've really appreciated your time today. I know you're really busy, so it's great to get 45 minutes with you today, and I know the network will get a lot from it as well. So just wanted to know, when we promote the podcast, what's the best way for the network to connect with you?
Yeah, Paul, first I want to say thanks for inviting me on. Really enjoyed it. And the best way for people to get in touch with me is just on LinkedIn. So you'll find me under either Alex Hunt or Alexander Hunt, and with IMI Hydronic Engineering here in Switzerland. Perfect. And what we'll do when we publish this, we'll make sure we have the link to your profile to make it easy for the network to reach out. And once again, huge thanks, Alex. Really enjoyed the conversation. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll be in touch again soon. Thanks very much. And you, Paul. Thanks. Thanks, Alex. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. If you'd like to reach out to Paul or myself, please feel free to send a connection through on LinkedIn. And if you'd like to listen to previous episodes of the podcast, you can find them all at our website, www.emearecruitment.eu.